So nice to meet you.
So let's hope that Facebook is going. Okay, good evening, everyone. We will call the regular meeting for Tuesday, August 12th, 2025 to order. With that, we do have several special town recognitions this evening to start the meeting. The first one, so most people see this individual at a lot of town events, donates a lot of time, energy, effort back to this community. At one point in time, this individual actually worked for the town of Smithsburg, was a very good employee, was very dedicated to the community. Purple and gold will run through his veins, and it is my distinct pleasure to ask Mr. Norm Potter to come up front. So we got him his own little plaque, and for most of you, may or may not be aware that Norm and Lauren and Annabelle are going to be leaving this community soon. And he did complete his last action light out. See, we all knew this was coming. But we did. We got him. We got him a plaque that says "Making a Difference." Presented to Norm Potter. For your impact on the Smithsburg community, its citizens, town activities, and friends, and it's dated today's date, but this plaque does not signify everything you mean to this community, everything you've ever put your heart, blood, sweat, and tears into. You and your family will all be missed in our community, but your impact will last a lifetime. Okay, council, we can all jump in if you like. I do get it to you, like, long enough for you. Things are good, you gotta celebrate, right? That's right. Any words? Because you're a man of so many, so go right ahead. Floor is yours.
It's not just me, it's my own person. I say, find family. It's each citizen out of this town. The chief, the mayor, council. Just trying to get everybody together as one. Because that's what we are, one. We're a town. Smithsburg will always, always have a special place in my heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I said there was two. So Many of you, if you've ever called into town hall, sent an email, or had a question about your water and billing, probably in the past would talk to Charlotte Zimes. And Charlotte had to leave us, and she is truly missed every day. And there were big shoes to fill when Charlotte left our community. She is doing fine, but can't make that journey down to Smithsburg from Hancock as she did. And probably about a year to 18 months ago, we got a unique individual that had some big shoes to fill, and she brought her wonderful personality, her hard work and dedication to her job every day. So I have a certificate of appreciation to present to Nancy Steele, our assistant clerk. It is by the mayor and on behalf of the town council and citizens of Smithsburg, Maryland, in recognition of your first year anniversary as a valuable member of our staff here in the town of Smithsburg, and for your commitment to outstanding service you provide our citizens every day. I know you hate this. And then the office staff want to make sure that we all got your little card. So thanks to Jenny and to Brian and everybody in the office, and then if the council wants to come back up. It's like a game show. No one, you get a prize. And hopefully there's like another 100 of these to go. We'll decide if this one is everyone in. Thank you. Now you have to give a speech. We are truly blessed in this community to have volunteers like Norm and his family that have done a lot of these events in town and have given back to the community. There are plenty more out there to celebrate and honor. And then we could not function as a government and as a town without our staff, whether that's our police department, our public works, planning, or in the office. They go above and beyond every day. So for as much as we as the elected body probably, want to pull our hair out, theoretically, right? These folks answer the call every day and really do love the community they work for and the people that they work for and with, and we're so blessed to have them as part of our community. So thank you. I think you got a big one next year, and I think Jeff's got a big one next year too. So we'll see. With that, I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance and ask Councilman Dan to lead us, so if you're able to stand. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a side note, our town manager was not feeling well, so he has left for the meeting. So I'll try to keep this on the rails as best as I can. With that, is there approval of the agenda for tonight?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Is there any other discussion or question? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approval of the meeting minutes. We have minutes from the July 1st regular meeting and July 15th special session. We can take them individually or together.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from July 1st and the special session from July 15th.
Thank you, Dave. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Jenny, I believe, has the executive session minutes from July 15th. It's the Sorry for the delay. We don't get these minutes in advance. So.
I'll make a motion to approve the executive meeting minutes from July 15th, 2025 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll pass those in. And then we'll give Jenny a moment to get situated before the treasurer's report. You good, Jenny? Okay. The next thing is the approval of the treasurer's report. Is there an action?
I'll move to accept the treasurer's report.
Second.
Okay, any discussion or questions for Jenny? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Did we get anything from either fire or Sims? I didn't see anything come through.
I asked earlier today and there wasn't any.
Okay. I'm sure they've been busy with other things, so we'll move to the mayor's report. Along with the town manager, Brian Brandt attended a joint meeting with the State Highway Administration, Delegate William Weibel, Delegate William Valentine, Brianna Dodge from RK&K to discuss the Water Street project and improvements to the intersection at Water Street and Main Street. We continue to focus on trying to find funding sources for not only the infrastructure below the road, but the road repair itself. Brian and I were alerted that state highway policy is, under this current governor and prior, is that they're not apt to accept roads back. So that's gonna probably change some of that discussion going forward, as far as there was discussion of doing the Water Street project and turning Water Street over to state highway. That is currently not state highway's policy. But both our delegation members vowed to continue to fight to get the funding that we were working towards or had at the end of the Hogan administration. So hopefully we'll continue to see them work Annapolis to try to get some funding to complete that project. Along with Town Manager Brian Brandt, attended a joint meeting with State Highway, again, with representatives from the Maryland Safe Routes to School program, representatives from RK&K to discuss a variety of improvements to include the intersection at Water and Main Street, trying to update and revamp the crosswalk indicators, things like that at the square, as well as, if you don't know, the town about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years, purchased the corner parcel at Geyser Way and North Main Street. Our ad hoc committee is in the process of looking for development uses for that. But one of the conversations was a sidewalk that would connect Geyser Way over to Grove Creek. So you'd have a crosswalk there, and then a sidewalk that would go up North Main Street to the elementary school. So we would have connectivity from our largest subdivision to our school complex. And folks from the Maryland Safe Routes to School program believe that that would fall within the purview of that Maryland State program, as well as discuss the potential for a crosswalk leading into Veterans Park off of West Water Street. Along with Manager Brian Brandt and Town Attorney Ed Kaczynski, we attended a meeting with the Washington County Historical District regarding a tax credit program. More information will follow once the staff of the Washington County Historical District group meets with the county treasurer to find out how that mechanism would actually work with the town. But basically, the town would have to opt in to a tax credit program, so that anyone that had a historical property wanted to seek that tax credit on their home, we'd have to be in that program in order for them to seek that tax credit. So there'll be more information coming about that. Along with Brian Brandt, council members McCormick, Fritsch, and members of the Park Commission, Jeanette Dan and Judith McFarland, met at Lyons Community Park Pond with staff from Washington County to discuss the pond area within the park. They provided us some information that was going to be laid out in options that was going to be sent back to the Park Commission for their discussion with recommendations of what that pond area may ultimately look like in Lyons Community Park. Along with Town Manager Brian Brandt, attended a meeting with the county CFO and county administrator to discuss a variety of options related to potential municipal bonding for long-term infrastructure improvements. And we have Lindsay Rader in the audience today, and her name came up several times in that conversation. The town is heading in the right direction as far as receiving our water, sewer, PERs, and we're working on our capital improvement plan with RK&K and the rate study, which is all important information that goes into municipal bonds for infrastructure projects. So we'll continue to work down that path. Along with council members Fritsch, Renard, McCormick, and Councilman Dan, the staff with Tableau's Table provided us a tour of their building and discussed their needs of our community. And it was quite eye-opening to hear 170 family/or individuals in our immediate community use their service. It was, like I said, a little eye-opening to see. Attended the 16th Annual National Night Out. Great job by our police chief and all the volunteers and vendors that participated, and along with all the other law enforcement agencies throughout the county and the city, our officers, first responders of the fire department and SIMS. And again, want to thank all of our vendors and First Unit Bank, Clocking Around Chicken, the MacBerry Band, Antietam Dairy, everyone that participated to make that a great community event. And I also want to thank Earlene Smith and her family. It's great that we can do two things simultaneously. We can come out and support our local law enforcement and first responders. At the same time, we can address the needs of our food pantry. And I thought the videos that you and Councilperson Renard did help to promote both of those. And as my post said the other day, thanks to Bonnie and Kathy, Jim, and everyone else, Sims, Fire, and police that donated to the pantry. It was quite a showing to see the amount of support they would get. And then last but not least, I want to thank Dave Smith, Matthew Smith, and Sam Smith of Troop 14 Smithsburg Scouts. If you notice, the Mildred Mickey Myers Council Chambers lettering is now up above the stage and on the wall above her memorial recognition in her honor. So they completed that last week, and it looks great, and we're glad they could do it. So with that, would have turned it over to Brian. But we have Brian's report. It's pretty much going to be the same with some other additional meetings that Brian has had. And I believe he said that if anybody had questions on this, to call him or email him, and he will certainly go over any of his report. Okay. Any questions on either one of those? Approval of department reports. So let's see. We didn't get a planning or zoning department, but we do have a police and a public works. Public works, same thing. Brian's not here, so if there's any questions related to the report, I would urge you to reach out to Brian directly. But Chief, if you want to come up and give a highlight of your report, that would be great.
Mr. Mayor, Planning Commission is here. Their report's here.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
Randy's. It's
Randy.
Randy's department, not so much the commission.
I got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thanks, Kathy. Bless you.
Good evening.
Hey,
Good
Chief.
evening.
One thing I'll highlight within the report is you'll notice a more detailed section on code enforcement. One of the things you failed to mention in your report is that you and the code enforcement officer actually walked through Whispering Hills
I saw it was in Kevin's.
and kind of inspected and observed the issues that were brought to everyone's attention. mentioned last meeting. He is working on those diligently as we speak, so hopefully most of those will be rectified. Aside from wanting to thank Ms. Smith and Councilman Renard, along with the Volunteer Fire Company and SCMS, and of course anyone who participated, I want to thank the community. 1,615 items were donated, which equated to 1,600 pounds of food for Tabitha's Table, which is an awesome job. So this town should give themselves a big pat on the back. I want to thank everyone for coming out to National Night Out. We had over 600 citizens of the town show up and partook in all the festivities. And I gotta thank Norm Potter. I gotta find a way to get you to come back every National Night Out. It's just not gonna be the same without him, so. I guess the next big thing after this third in the Burg will be our fun run and then Shop with a Cop. And I would like to thank two of our major sponsors who we don't normally have in the room at the same time. So I'd like to thank Mr. Mike Scott and Mr. Dan Cross. So thank you, gentlemen. 4 years in a row, they have been big supporters and continue to show support for the children in this town, and I really appreciate both of them. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you for letting us partner and
It was awesome.
fill the pantry.
It was awesome, so.
Really was.
How are you doing on registrations for the fun run?
We're at 44 currently.
Okay, runners, walkers?
Councilwoman Renard and Ms. Smith are going to do their due diligence this weekend and have sign-ups and also pass out flyers at Third in the Burg, and I appreciate all their help. We'll get there.
And you're getting in the dunk tank on Saturday, right?
I will not be here.
No, okay. Way to get out of that one.
But I do volunteer the mayor. Officer Work will be in charge.
Uh-oh. See his arm. Yeah, okay. But no, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the departmental reports?
Motion to approve the departmental reports.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so approval of the commission reports. We did receive one from the Economic Development, Parks, Ad hoc, and Planning, I believe. And with the ad hoc, you'll see there's May 18th minutes and July 10th. So they submitted both, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, members of the ad hoc will be here in September to give an update on their developmental plan or their tree planting plan. I can't remember which one it is, but they'll be here in September. So is there a motion or an action?
I'll make a motion to approve the commission reports as submitted.
Or second?
I'll second that.
Any questions or comments?
Just
Yes.
a quick comment for Parks. They did a beautiful job on the sign at Lions Park. If you haven't seen it, it's certainly worth riding out and taking a look. And just a huge shout out, EDC, thank you for painting the sign purple. There you go, Wes. Yeah, it's fine in purple. Mayor, I'd like to ask you a question, if I may.
Sure.
What do we have to do to make purple the official town color of Smithsburg?
I'm sure we can come up with a resolution, right, Ed? Yeah, we can do that.
Moving forward, that would really be,
Put it on paper.
It might be more symbolic than anything else, but yeah, we could certainly entertain that after the accolades and outcry of, oh yes, it's no longer blue, it's purple. But no.
but thank you to all the volunteers that work on that.
We have a motion and a second, right?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next thing is citizen comment. We did have one sign up. If anyone wants to speak that didn't sign up after we get through Ms. Webb, if you'd like to come up, Ashley. This is you. So Ms. Webb reached out. There was a leak. Please, if I get this wrong, there was a leak that was detected after several days, I think it was.
No, the leak happened on on April 14th.
Okay.
I talked to Jenny when she called me, and we weren't notified until like June 4th-ish.
Okay, right, when the bill comes out.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it was an extended leak time.
Right, so I think when you reached out, the question was, you had seen there's others that have come before and have had the sewer prorated because it never actually physically went into the system.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sorry that Brian had to leave, but if you wanna detail exactly what do you know what the bill is?
Yeah, I have it with me. It's extremely high. Do you want me to just tell you what the water, sewer, and the total is?
Yeah, if you wanna, yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
fine.
so, it looks like the water charge was $638.12. The sewer charge was $685.55. And like I said, the leak started, Jenny said that it spiked, like a huge spike on April 14th. And this bill is from March 4th to June 2nd. So from April 14th to June 2nd and beyond, until we were able to figure out a way to find it and fix it, it was leaking an astronomical amount of water. I mean, we used, just that billing period, 50,000 gallons of water.
That's where it all went.
And it was a pond in the yard. It did not go into the sewer. So, yeah, this is like a, more for a lot of us. So it's really,
And I believe, like I said, the comment was that we've had some others that have come in with the same issue that we've looked at, working with staff to prorate some of the sewer.
Yeah.
So I told Ms. Webb to come before council. I don't have the arbitrary authority to do that, so if, however council would like to proceed, I think that's why she's here this evening.
yes.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with knocking off the sewer amount, but Jenny, how do we normally handle that? Because obviously there is some sewer usage. Do we look at previous quarters and average it out, or?
Yeah, I'll just have to look through the data log, because what there's, it's much easier to see what was used and then
So it's pretty much an average, I think, is what we've
Okay.
typically done before.
So then do we need a motion with an amount, or?
If you don't mind, that way it's kind of,
What's the amount? Does anyone know?
yeah, the amount of the bill is like over.
No, but how
1,300.
much to discount
The
it?
total bill is $1,338.67.
But how much should we discount it by? How much of the sewer charge?
I mean, that's a great question. I wanna say, and Jenny, maybe you can look at my previous bill, and we unfortunately already shredded our stuff from previous time, but, I think our sewer charges are usually around 200. So,
So maybe the motion
This
would
is a
just be to
percent.
average it out and then work it that way.
That's fine.
I mean, whatever you guys are comfortable with, Jenny and Brian. Yeah. And we can go back and look at what we did when the three other ones came in and mirror what we did then,
Yeah, that,
just so it's
the
consistent.
precedent, yeah.
yeah, because unfortunately, there's no way for, homeowners responsible for it, which I get, but there's no way to know it's leaking all this time, and, unfortunately, we have to then get companies out to look at it and help find it and get it repaired, and it's just an extreme amount of money all around.
Sure.
Miss Ashley, when
Yes.
did you notice the pond in the yard?
So it's funny, the pond in the yard, the sewer from front of our house is 400 feet. So it
Okay.
took us a long time to find the leak. It was
Okay.
pretty deep into the ground where the sewer runs right on top, the water, I'm sorry, runs right on top of our sewer line, which was pretty far into the ground. So it took a lot of
And it finally had to bubble up and, yeah.
finally, and getting someone to help us find it and getting someone to help dig and repair, and so I have pictures, but it was just a huge pond once we dug down to get close to the line.
But it has been fixed. Okay. Do you know about what time? Was that April, May, June, before you?
It was, well, I didn't know about the leak until June,
So
it was,
under until you started to dig and then, okay, gotcha.
yeah, so it took a while for us to get it figured out.
Sure.
So
So, again,
I would say like middle of June is probably,
Right. And are you familiar with is it plume?
flume.
Plume. That is something that Councilman John Schneider swears by.
Yeah, it's-
Just take the opportunity to bring it up again. And
We can send you information on it.
Yeah.
It's a device that actually goes to the outside at the meter crop.
okay,
It's a smart device, so it'll alert you
okay.
in the real time if you've got a leak, what appliance you're using, how much gallons it's flowing through.
Okay.
So,
Kids
yeah,
are playing with the hose in the
Yep.
backyard.
That would be amazing because,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah, we can can send you the information on that,
Okay.
but if council just wants to make a motion that Jenny and Brian can
Use
work with Ms.
precedent?
Webb, yep, and use precedent to.
Yeah, I'll make that
You go with
motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any other discussion or question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
appreciate
you.
you coming in.
Thank you.
Again, if anybody wants to speak that didn't sign up, you're more than welcome to come forward now. We'll move into old business. The next thing is to consider, discuss Cloverly LLC Special Taxing District request. We did receive a Special Taxing District 101 from our attorney. And now we have Mr. Cross here who would like to present what it is exactly he's requesting. So, Mr. Cross?
Thank you.
You, your team, whoever else wanna, if there's not enough seats, please pull chairs up. Just make sure you pull the microphone close to you. Pretty big topic, so we just wanna make sure everyone in the Facebook world can hear you.
For the record, I'm Daniel Cross. I'm the principal for Cross & Company. We are the developer for Cloverly here in Smithsburg. I'm accompanied by Mr. Keenan Rice of Municap and Anna Horvey of McGuire Woods. I am following up on a letter submitted, or a request submitted to council in June
Thank you.
for consideration of creation of a special taxing district to encompass the 75 acres that is owned by Cloverly at the Cloverly Development. And Ms. Horvey is here this evening together with counsel for the town and Keenan to describe this mechanism as it is used in Maryland by other developments and answer your questions.
My name's Anna Borday. I'm an attorney at McGuire Woods. I'm a bond attorney, which is an arcane practice of law that many of you probably don't have much experience with, but part of my job is to help educate folks on what we do, in part because it's an unusual request to make. So I know that Ms. Rader had prepared information for you, a primer basically on what a special taxing district is, and some of that information is repeated in the presentation that I prepared, and I don't want to bore you to death with all of that, so I'm going to go very high level with what I prepared, and you're welcome to peruse that at your leisure. But essentially, a special taxing district in Maryland exists so that local governments can create a defined geographic area to finance public infrastructure improvements for the development of that particular land area that they identify. One of the good things about special taxing districts and the reasons that people create them is to provide benefits to properties that otherwise would not receive those benefits. They wouldn't otherwise receive the water and sewer or the stormwater management benefits that the special taxing district can finance and provide. And often they don't have another source of financing available to them because in going to a bank or a regular financial institution, these types of improvements often get turned down or they're not financially practicable because the interest rate that would be charged for financing of the loans would be much higher than what you could get through a special taxing district mechanism. So special taxing districts, in the way that they're structured, help ensure then that those improvements that go into the district are actually borne by the people who live within that district. So the owners and the eventual residents of those districts benefit from the improvements that get put into the ground. So you've heard the word special tax now a few times in talking about the district. So what is a special tax? A special tax is an assessment that's levied on all real property and personal property that's in that district that gets created, that defined geographic area. So it's not something that goes against every property owner within the town, but only the property owners that are located within that particular district.
So how does that affect the ones that are already there? This would only be on the ones that are in new development, because there are residents that live along Cloverly Lane. So is that?
So they would not necessarily be in the district.
Okay, that's what I just want to clarify, so that, okay.
Those remaining houses on Cloverly Farm Lane, Eddie Brown's here this evening, are still in Washington County.
Okay.
Not under your jurisdiction.
Just
They're
wanted to
not
make
part
sure.
of my
Okay,
acreage.
yep, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
So that special tax then is a lien that gets created against the property. And the way that we property owners know about the fact that this lien exists is by recording a record in the local land records, so that any time that someone goes to do a title search or purchases property, they're able to find out that that special tax exists. It's not a surprise to them then that it exists whenever they go to move into the development. That lien exists. It doesn't actually get charged. The special tax doesn't get charged unless bonds are eventually issued. And then the amount of special tax that gets paid is tied to the debt service on the bonds that are eventually issued. This lien exists, but it doesn't prevent, I hate the word lien sometimes, because people think it prevents you from being able to sell your land. Somehow it would be an impediment to your ability to get financing for your property or selling the land in the future. And that's true for some types of liens, but not for a special tax lien. A special tax lien doesn't work in the same way that, like, if you have a mortgage on your property or some other encumbrance, like a home equity loan, something like that might function. It's not going to be preventative to your ability to buy and sell the land within the district.
But the tax does carry over to the next property owner.
Yes, sir, it runs with the land, so it is based on, the person who pays is the person who owns the land at that
Correct.
time. Yep. So, in the next slide, we talk about how special taxing districts are created, and I know Lindsay went into great detail in the materials that she prepared for you, so I didn't want to go super in-depth on that slide, because I think you've gotten all the primer that you need on that. But I will say that if you elect to proceed with this particular request, you would have to have a public hearing so that the members of the public could have an opportunity to come in and talk to you about whether or not they would support this type of development moving forward, and have an ability to be heard then before you should move forward with the development. So how are special taxes levied and collected? Well, one of the things that will happen in connection with the creation of the district is Keenan will, through MuniCap, create what's called a rate and method. And he will go through that process in figuring out how special taxes get imposed on the various properties located within the district. The way that it's done is the amount depends on the type of development that will be placed on the property. So if there's residential development, that gets levied at a different rate than if there's commercial development that would be put on the property. So when Keenan comes in and does the rate and method, he will figure out a fair allocation of the special taxes based on the type of property and the size of the property, and then that will be levied across the various properties within the district. Special taxes work just like any other tax. They're levied and assessed in the same ways. So usually what we do is we work with the taxing authority. Here, I think that you work likely with your local county, with Washington County, to make sure that your taxes show up on the Washington County bill. And one of the things that we would do then is work with Washington County to make sure that that special tax shows up on the regular tax bill that people receive, so it's not a surprise. And then also they get notice of the tax and know where to go whenever they have questions.
So at the risk of correcting my counsel, yes, the town sends out its own real property tax bill separate from the county. A discussion of mechanism would be, do you put the special tax on your bill? Do we put it on the county bill? I don't think that has to be resolved tonight.
Lindsay, if you
No,
want to
but-
pull that close and then give a,
I think typically if the town is issuing the tax bills, we would want it to go on the town tax bill,
Okay.
not on the county.
That makes sense.
thank you.
Sure.
So how do special taxing districts ultimately finance those improvements that we talked about? What will happen is a governing body like yourselves are able to authorize the issuance of bonds that are then used to finance the infrastructure improvements that go into the district. That authorization happens through either a resolution or an ordinance, and Lindsay laid out the process by which that would occur within the town. Once you have an authorization in hand, those bonds can be sold to the municipal bond market through an underwriter, i.e. an investment banker. I think Dan, in his letter to you with the request, had indicated that he might use Mesero as a potential underwriter. They have a great reputation in the marketplace. They work with a number of developers across the state and outside of the state too, in seeing districts like this come to life and making sure that they get the financing that they need for the improvements that go into the ground. So what happens then when you issue those bonds, you get what are called bond proceeds, the money then to pay for the purchase of those bonds. Those used to fill up reserve funds, so sometimes underwriters require that you have a reserve fund to make sure that there's a mechanism to repay the debt in case you have a shortfall for some reason in the revenues that you're collecting.
So this money goes to the developer?
No, it actually goes into a fund that is
Okay.
held typically by a trustee. So normally that's a bank, like M&T Bank, you've heard of them, they're often the trustee in these transactions. And what the developer then would do is sign a development agreement with the town that dictates how funds from the improvement fund can be requisitioned out. So in normal transactions, what happens is Dan would be responsible for putting in the improvements into the ground. At the end of each month, he would send in a requisition to the trustee and to the town to sign off on. And then if everyone agrees that he really did put the infrastructure into the ground, then the money will come out of that fund in the amount of the requisition and be sent to pay Dan to reimburse him for those improvements.
So, in your initial letter, Dan, you listed like 14 million some odd dollars. What happens with inflationary cost if by the time we submit, we go through, there's escalation in cost of either material, services, construction? Is it then you come back and want another bite of the apple with the tax, or it's just you've now got to come up with the difference between, let's say you want, your proposal's 14 million, but it ends up coming in at 16.5. Where do we gather that other 2.5 million?
So typically, what we do to hedge against that happening is make sure that Dan would sign a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price contract, in advance of the bonds being issued, so that he knows exactly how much he needs in order to fund the infrastructure. And because he has that GMP, he has a guaranteed price then for what his general contractor will charge him for those infrastructure improvements, so that delta normally doesn't exist.
Okay. As we've seen with our wastewater treatment plant, things can get a little off rail.
You never know.
I think I should go to Huntsbury Brothers and say,
So I listed out in the slide presentation the different types of infrastructure that can be financed. Some of that is sewers, water systems, stormwater management, roads, bridges, parks, lighting, recreational facilities. But the one thing that it typically cannot be used for in order to be done on a tax-exempt basis is finance private buildings. So I say that to be clear that even though Dan is thinking about going vertical with construction and putting on commercial properties and eventually houses as well, these bonds would not be used to finance the construction of those houses themselves. This is only going to finance the horizontal infrastructure that's necessary to go vertical, but doesn't actually finance the vertical improvements.
and your use of the word private structure is appropriate, because please remember, we are building a public water boost pump station, which we will deed to the town.
So some of the key components of special taxing district financings, so the amount of the bonds issued is determined based on the amount of infrastructure needed to develop the property. So as I mentioned, we would have a GMP that lays out what the cost would be. The other thing that typically comes with these types of financings is we get an engineer involved, a third-party, private, an independent engineer, who comes in and opines and says that the cost at which Dan has procured the construction services is a reasonable cost. And not only is it reasonable, it is expected then to result in everything that he has said will actually be put into the ground. The bonds and the repayment thereof are secured by the special tax revenues. So when those special taxes are levied and then collected, those revenues are put into a pot. It's called a special tax fund. A special tax fund is then used to pay the principal and interest on the bonds. So we pledge that fund to the repayment then of the principal and interest, and i.e. the debt service on the bonds. What that means for the town is the town itself does not incur liability for the bonds or the repayment thereof. There's no pledge of your full faith and credit. This is not on your books as something against your credit line. This would not be something that counts against your rating with public rating agencies like Moody's or S&Ps. So when you go to issue those water and sewer bonds that you talked about earlier today, this would not be an item on your books that impacts the rating that you get for those particular bonds, because this is not secured by your full faith and credit. pledge then of other town assessments or taxes, only of the special taxation and that and the special assessment amount. And the other thing that comes with these is that all of the costs of the town would incur, like Ms. Rader's appearance, Ms. Rader's work on this particular deal, that's all gets paid out by Dan as a part of this transaction. We would not be looking to the town to make the payment for those services. So the time and effort and the energy of the expert that goes into these deals is paid out of the transaction. It is not something that counts that we would expect you to pay out of your general fund balances.
So if, heaven forbid, something happens and the project doesn't go to fruition, what happens?
Bondholders, as the investors in the deal, bear that risk. They bear the risk of the potential for a shortfall. And the way in which they do that is in part because these deals are often unrated, high yield investment. So in return for getting a higher interest rate, they're taking on that risk of potential lack of revenues to repay them.
Right. And again, the town has no liability, no responsibility. Heaven forbid, you know, it doesn't happen. It's the bondholder's responsibility and liability.
They bear that burden. They bear the burden.
Because they're getting the high yield
Mhm.
and they're taking the high risk to,
That's correct.
to do that.
That's right. So again, there would be no expectation if the special tax collections do not meet what is necessary to make the principal and interest payments, that the town would step in and make that amount whole. That bondholders understand that. We prepare extensive disclosure as a part of the public bond offering process. Those books are super thick.
Right.
10-point font, single-spaced.
Right.
They get all of the information about what the potential investment looks like. These are sophisticated investors. One of the things that Ms. Rader pointed out in the materials that she prepared was that typically these are offered in what we call authorized denominations of $100,000 or more. So we get sophisticated investors who understand what they're signing up for and understand the risk related to potential for lack of repayment.
So let me stop you there. I'm gonna transition over to Lindsay. So all this sounds great. What are the hangups? What are the potential pitfalls for the town? If there are any, but this, you know, that sounds like there's no liability, there's really minimal risk to the town. Current residents that live in Whispering Hills, Mountain Shadows, downtown Smithsburg, there's no risk there. It seems like it's all over here, but, you know, what aren't we seeing?
Well, Ms. Horvey is correct that the bondholders bear the risk, and I think another couple important points to make are that, one, you're not loaning the proceeds to the developer, so it's not the development entity's obligation to pay back the bonds, as is the case when the town has issued conduit revenue bonds before and loaned them to a nonprofit entity, and that it's that nonprofit entity's obligation to pay the bonds. The obligation to pay the special taxes runs with the land of the, as it's a legal term, runs with the land, so that the property owners within the district have to pay the special taxes. If they don't, because the special taxes have the same lien priority as your normal ad valorem taxes, then the property goes to tax sale. Now, of course, sometimes a tax sale of property is not bought in right away. That's one of the reasons that typically a bond issue is sized to provide a reserve fund, so that if not all of the necessary special taxes are collected in each year, hopefully you can use the reserve fund to cover that shortfall for a period of a year or two, depending on how that reserve fund is sized. And then hopefully eventually the properties are bought out at tax sale, and of course they have to come current on the delinquent taxes. Those taxes then go into the special fund, which, as Anna pointed out, the town has to create a special fund pursuant to the statute, but as you collect those special taxes, you're going to transfer them over to the bond trustee very promptly to make sure that they don't get mixed up with your general fund.
So in this scenario, Mr. Cross owns the majority, well, all of that parcel.
And until he sells off the parcels, he or his development entity as the landowner of record is responsible for paying the special taxes. And it's typical in these transactions that the developer is really the party paying the taxes for a period of time until all the vertical development is done. And if in a situation where the development doesn't occur as anticipated, the landowner, the developer, as the landowner, is still responsible for paying the special taxes. There's no out just because development did not occur.
So then to Councilman Fritsch's question, so let's say that scenario occurs, Mr. Cross gets to a point, there's 5 phases, I believe, in this ultimate plan, gets to a point where he can't complete, wants to sell what's left available to the next owner. Does the next owner then occur that special taxing district? I think that's what you said at the beginning, right?
Yes, that's what running with, so
I
it's
just want to make
people
sure
buy
that
out,
I
yes.
understood that if he decides, hey, I've got phase 1, but I'm just going to
Yeah.
sell the rest of it to Ryan Holmes or whomever else, then they, until they sell their lots, would be responsible for.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So what
Absolutely.
if he can't sell because it's not an attractive offer, it's not attractive property because of the additional cost? What happens then?
Again, as the landowner, still responsible to pay the special taxes.
What if
And
the,
if
what if
does not pay
Cloverly
the special
LLC
taxes.
goes bankrupt?
I'm sorry?
What if Cloverly LLC goes bankrupt?
Well, if Cloverly LLC goes bankrupt, there may be a period of time where that comes into play with the special taxes. But again, the town is not responsible for paying the bonds during that period. The town is never responsible. And Ms. Horvey pointed out that because these are special taxing district bonds, it won't have any impact on any rated bonds issued by the town. The town doesn't have a rating on any of its bonds that were issued for its own purposes. Typically, you've gone either to the Maryland Water Quality Financing Administration or a bank, and so those have all been unrated bonds. So it is, even for a water or sewer project in the future for your own purposes, you're not likely to be issuing rated bonds anytime soon.
Thank you. And it's not that I don't trust you, it's just that, you work for the
No,
developer,
I
so.
understand. You have to hear both sides.
Yeah.
The-
Sure.
Mr. Dan, to help answer your question. So in a bankruptcy, a special tax is what's known as a preferred secured creditor. So it gets paid first along with other regular property taxes before any other obligation gets paid. Usually it will get paid because the taxes as a percent of the value is fairly low. That's one part of the analysis when the bonds are issued, is to make sure there's significant value in the collateral, in a sense, in the property. But worst case, property goes to bankruptcy and no one pays the tax. It's the bondholders who end up taking that loss because they took that risk. They knew they took that risk. They got compensated for taking that risk. So at the end of the day, that's their risk.
So, Mr. Cross, I have a question on the alarm tax and you not pricing yourself out of the market to actually sell your lots. So this isn't gonna be the retail plus all this. There'll be some modification to make sure it's whole, or is this lots X, we're gonna have a regular tax and then we're gonna have this special tax on top of it?
Let me answer the question twofold. Let me remind everyone that there are significant portions of the Cloverleaf property that I do not intend to sell,
Okay.
that we will retain for ground lease purposes. So in my negotiations with the user of the land, as we negotiate who's responsible for the taxes, this topic will come up. But those will be private negotiations. And this is particularly pertinent to the commercial corner, to the senior living compound on the northwest corner, and the apartment building. Then to your point, the consumer of a home, townhouse or single-family home, is concerned about PI, TIH. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and homeowners association dues. And the principal is going to be a function of purchase price and whatever down payment in today's economy they can bring. But ultimately, that consumer is looking for an affordable end-of-the-month nut. Again, including the HOA dues. Now, in this circumstance, it is PI, TIH, and special. So we've increased their monthly nut. How how do I deal with that? How do I remain competitive compared to other prospective developments in Washington County or the geographic area? We take a reduction in principal price so that that number balances out.
So
PITIH in conventional financing versus PITIH plus special in this financing, as long as that monthly number comes out the same to the consumer, do they care?
So let me, that's a great point there, because what you're saying is you're going to reduce the price of the home to make it more attractive, so all the numbers balance out. But when you do that, you reduce the assessable tax rate, so the town ends up collecting less money. So when you say that it'll be no cost to the town, that's not entirely true.
So that's a very good question that's not so easy to answer because property is supposed to be valued for taxes free and clear. So they're not supposed to take into consideration the special tax lien. Okay, they're supposed to value it based on the cash value of the property. Does the assessor always do that? Well, it depends. If they're
It's also on.
yeah, because if they're
Sell
only
out.
looking at sales prices within the community, they're going to see that's what the homes are selling for, okay? If they're looking beyond the district and looking at how other similar homes, then that's how they're going to base the value. You know, theoretically, it should not result in a lower value, but it just really depends upon what they're looking at for purposes of how they're valuing the property.
So it could potentially lower the assessable amount that we collect, lower home values in Cloverly, which will also possibly lower home values in Smithsburg. Because a brand new home is selling for $50,000 less than it would otherwise. All of a sudden, a home in Whispering Hills is,
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be $50,000 less. I mean, to be honest with you, we haven't seen that effect. We've worked on a lot of these districts in Maryland and other states, and we haven't really seen that effect. And
so the amount is about roughly $39,000 per dwelling unit. That seems like a lot. I haven't done this.
30-year amortization,
So
right?
14 million divided by the total number
right,
of
it's
units that they're
amortized,
planning.
paid back over 30 years.
Is
The way
that-
they're supposed to value the property.
So is there a standard ratio that we could look at to see if we're in line with other similar developments? Is
When
that-
you say ratio,
Yeah, because we're looking at around, let's say $40,000 per unit over 30 years.
yes.
That's an increase of, 1,000 something per year.
Yes, we can help, we have that data, we can help you look at that. That is something that's important, we take into consideration when Anna mentioned earlier about setting up the special taxes and making sure they're fair and reasonable. Well, they have to be, first of all, they have to be benefit-based. The property has to get a special benefit from the improvements. But we also look at the level of the special tax. We don't want that special tax to be so high that it's really affecting the marketing of the bonds, the marketing of the housing units. So we want to try to stay within like a reasonable range that we see. And for example, Brunswick has.
What is a reasonable range?
Well, so I don't remember off the top of my head, but we can bring that data to you. So like Brunswick has a special taxing district, Urbana has a special taxing district, Lake Linganore has 2 special taxing districts. So there's other area projects that have special, or that where the local government counties created.
So you've been looking at this, but you don't know what the acceptable range is?
I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you. But I can, it's not difficult.
I suspect this development is abnormally high, but
We'll check. I don't think so, but, I mean, the cost, if we look at Urbana, over $100 million of bonds have been issued in Urbana. Brunswick, very significant amount of bonds are issued for Brunswick. But I can get you those numbers tomorrow. I just don't remember them off the top of my head.
Mr. Mayor, could
Yes,
you
sir.
let
Yes, sorry.
Ms. Sorbe finish her brief and then we'll continue the Q&A, please?
Yep, thank you.
I only have one slide left.
No, you're good, sorry. It's one of those, like, if we don't get it out while we're thinking about it, yeah.
Gotta do it while you're
Yeah.
thinking about it, or else you forget. So the last slide we have is just examples by location of other special taxing districts that exist in Maryland today. Amongst the 3 of us, we have touched every one of these projects, and this is just fractions of what we can say.
I'm not part of that jury.
Yeah, I got, yeah.
So, when Mr. Bryce mentioned that we have other exemplars, we most certainly do, and we have them within the state and outside of the state. Some of the ways that we see them evaluated, and this is not something that I can produce the numbers on today because we wouldn't have these numbers quite yet, but one of the ways that sometimes investors look at this is the value to lien ratio. What is the value of the property against the lien for the special taxes that would be imposed? But we wouldn't know that until we actually get appraisals in hand in order to make that determination.
Could I,
We have a second.
Why don't you just take it right
So,
off?
I remembered something. I want to come back to your question. So we've done some evaluation, not all fresh in my mind. I apologize for that. But actually, one of the conclusions we came to when we did the initial evaluation, you may remember, is that the special tax would be too high. That we didn't feel it was supportable. And the structure of the bonds that are being proposed, the portion of the bonds would be paid off as the homes are sold. So the full amount would not be passed through. Because we thought it was important to maintain this moderate range of the tax that the future home buyers are paying. And we're happy to share those numbers with you to show you. But your question was a very good question. And in fact, you were right. We came to the same conclusion and we adjusted the structure to address that so that the tax that's being passed through the home buyers is a much more modest amount. It's not the full amount of the bonds that are initially issued.
Are we to the question portion, or
I'm finished now.
Is there anything, Lindsay, that you want to touch on that from the town perspective, or?
Just a couple of things.
Sure.
One, I think it's important to understand that while these bonds are outstanding, that the monies in the special fund, the town cannot touch those for any other purpose. And in fact, those monies are invested as they come in and are used to reduce the amount in future years, and Keenan will correct me if I'm misstating anything, that's actually assessed against the landowners in terms of their special taxes. So there will be investment earnings on that special fund that will be used to reduce, because we can't use the money for any other purpose. And in terms of sizing the bond issue, it's not only the cost of the improvements, typically a reserve fund, the cost of issuance of the bond issue. Anna mentioned that Mr. Cross or his development company would be paying our fees during the process if the town proceeds to get to closing. If we are able to size the bonds at a level that supports it, then the cost of issuance portion of those bonds would be used to reimburse him for the cost of issuance he has laid out through the process. Also, in terms of coming up with what goes on your tax bills, MuniCap puts together the rate and method and is under engagement with the developer in this case, but typically then it kind of shifts its hat once the bonds are issued and is typically hired by the issuer of the bonds to serve as the administrator of the district, because you don't have the staff or really the wherewithal to calculate the special taxes each year. And so MuniCap works with you, under contract with you, to actually implement the rate and method and get the info together for you to put on your tax bills each year. And in fact, those special taxes are usually sized to cover not only principal and interest on the bonds, but the costs of the administrator, so that you're not coming out of pocket to pay the administrator. The special taxes are funding that. Usually there's a little bit of excess included for any legal costs or something else that comes up that is out of the norm, to also cover any kind of continuing disclosure that the town might have to make on an annual basis. And we try very carefully during the process to limit the amount of information the town would be responsible for helping to generate for that annual continuing disclosure. If these bonds are sold to the public market, then they expect some ongoing disclosure in each year. But MuniCap is the administrator. really puts that all together and works with you to identify what it needs from the town. And the special taxes are also sized to cover any replenishment of the reserve in the event the reserve fund needs to be hit in any year. And Keenan, am I missing anything important in terms of the role of the administrator?
You're not.
Okay. But I think, I do also want to point out, many times a developer will ask a municipality to issue hybrid tax increment financing and special taxing district bonds. With that type of a structure, and I don't want to go too much into the detail of a tax increment financing, but because it is anticipated, of course, that all of the property within the district will grow in value in its assessable base over the life of the bond issue, the assessable base as of a certain date and time before those bonds are issued is known as the original assessable base. And your annual ad valorem taxes against that original assessable base would come to the town, but the portion of your taxes, your ad valorem taxes, that are assessed against the increase in value, which is known as the tax increment, that tax increment, you would not receive those taxes. They would go to pay the hybrid TIF special taxing district bonds. The developer is not asking for that in this case. So you are not going, if you proceed, you will not be foregoing any of your normal ad valorem taxes. So I wanted to point that out because that is a common structure in some of these financings in Maryland. And it's actually, if you proceed, it's to the town's benefit that this is a pure special taxing district financing.
In your experience, because you said you've worked on some of these other developments that have used special taxing districts, was the decision to seek this type of financing made early on or at the last minute?
It's always developer driven, the developer coming and asking for this type of financing. In terms of the issuer, one of the questions goes to be, okay, what steps have you taken to try and secure financing to fund these costs yourself to then pass on to your homeowners? So if you proceed with the process, merely creating the special taxing district through a designation resolution or authorizing the issuance of the bonds through an ordinance or resolution or adopting the special taxing methodology through approval of the rate and method does not obligate you to issue the bonds. There is an entire due diligence process that we go through, that you are involved and town staff and your professionals are involved in. And we typically recommend, because I cannot give financial advice, that the town would hire an independent financial advisor because MuniCap is is under contract with the developer in this case to look out for your financial interests and vet the financial rate and method. And so, I'm sorry?
What financial interest are you talking about? Because I thought this
No, the rate and method, how not your financial interests in terms of your being responsible for paying the bonds, but vetting the special tax, the analysis of the rate and method and how it is put together. And again, that is a professional that you would ask the developer to pay for. You would not come out of pocket.
Who
Yes.
covers, so it's not a town
It
obligated
is not a
cost.
town
Okay.
cost.
Just the check and balance.
It's a check and balance, exactly.
So let me just confirm what I think I heard, which is that we've got a 30-year special tax payback time period, correct?
Correct.
And that during that 30 years, Municorp would be, is that the right, am I saying that right? Municap would be, their work that they would be doing every single year of those 30 years would be covered by the special tax reserve fund, not by the town.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So basically, the benefit to a developer is instead of, it's like spreading it over 30 years, still having the people who are purchasing the property responsible as if they would when you were to charge upfront for all the costs. And all you're doing is basically changing the upfront to a 30-year better playing field in some ways for the purchaser too. Am I right or wrong on that?
That is absolutely a part of it. The fact that you can have, instead of a traditional bank financing, which would have maybe like a 5, 10, 15-year term,
Right.
the fact that you can extend it to 30 years is absolutely an advantageous factor in pursuing a special taxing district. There's a couple other things too that go with it. One is the type of improvements that you're financing. Sometimes these are not things that banks care to invest in because there's not the same end user as a commercial development where you're purchasing a building and then you eventually have tenants that are moving on. This is a different type of improvement that we're financing here. And then the other thing to think about is the rate that you incur, the interest rate. So instead of a traditional bank financing, by being able to do it this way, you can tap into the tax exemption under federal tax code and issue it at a lower interest rate than what you could get from a traditional bank financing. So it's both the term and the rate and the type of improvements.
So to Lindsay's point a moment ago, and I don't know if you can get into it, what steps have you partaken to get us to this request, piggybacking off Councilman Dan's comment of, like, we're going down a track and then all of a sudden it's, hey, I've got this idea for a special taxing district. So I'm sure you've gone through and turned over every rock and every stone you could to get to this point. So to that
Well,
point.
Mr. Mayor, as I've appeared before council previously, we've been in the finance markets for over a year, seeking to get Cloverleaf funded. And there have been a variety of obstructions. As an example, the county wastewater treatment plant is how many years behind schedule? There are not enough EDUs left in the existing facility to support Cloverleaf. So how many banks want to lend me the funds for us to go ahead and pay all the upfront infrastructure costs? The State Highway Administration improvements along 77 and 64 will be the very proud users of the first painted green on the pavement dedicated bicycle lane on Maryland 64 between Hagerstown and the Pennsylvania state line for the 1,600 feet that's on 64. There's a cost that comes with that. The storm water that we're taking care of 400 acres of storm water coming down off the mountain, which right now roars down 77. Eddie Brown, when it roars past the front of Cloverleaf Farm Lane on a rainy day, how bad is it? And flows over the intersection of 64 and 77 on the South Main. Part of the direction was we had to address that. So my point is, we've been in the finance markets, but there are a significant public infrastructure upfront cost before I can get onto the ground at Cloverleaf and start building roads, sewer, and infrastructure that directly supports the houses. Bankers and traditional finance avenues have turned away from that because we don't break even until you get into Cloverleaf Phase 2. The number of months that goes by disqualifies us from most financing outfits. So candidly, we found Keenan. We began to talk to other developers, including the developer in Brunswick, and said, how did you crack this nut? And this is what we came to. Now, this isn't to say that we won't end up with both. Keenan has already pointed out that when we did initial analysis, you can't charge all of this through. You'll make the prices prohibitive. So I think we're going to end up in a mixture, but I've got to get the first domino to fall in order to make that mixture happen. Does that address your question,
It does.
sir?
I think it's a fair point so that it's again, how we got to this point. In your letter, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
That's all right,
Nope.
I have a few questions.
Go right ahead, I've
You're
stolen the thunder.
That's
Go
okay,
ahead, your
you're
turn.
getting
Go
ahead
ahead.
of me. And I don't mean to go backwards, excuse me. Am I understanding that there is an expiration to this tax? Like 30 years, your homeowners won't be paying this tax at year 31? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So there is an end date?
Yes.
Okay.
The bonds cannot mature more than 30 years after their date of issuance, and we don't actually impose the special taxes until the bonds are issued. So while the structure is put in place, nobody receives a tax bill until the bonds are issued. And a couple more points that I think, will factor into, I think, where you're going with your question, is that typically these bonds, you don't start paying the principal right away. Typically the bond proceeds are used to fund what is called capitalized interest, which under the federal tax code can basically be up to 3 years. It'll depend on the construction period of the public improvements in question. So in the early years of that 30-year period, principal may actually only be paid over 25 or 27 years, and interest is actually funded from the bond proceeds for a couple years initially. But once you get to the end of that 30-year period, the special taxes are no longer imposed.
Okay. And then you had mentioned earlier that you have sophisticated investors. What happens if the bonds are not sold?
So that is an unlikely scenario.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. That's a very unlikely scenario, in part because we would have an investment banker on board with the team, and usually the way that this works is the investment banker will essentially stand behind the deal. So if they go out with an offering document, that book that I was talking about, if they cannot resell to their investors, they will buy all of the bonds themselves and hold them on their books.
So you're very confident that that will be.
Yes, normally we do a bond purchase agreement on an all or nothing basis, so they will purchase all of the bonds and hold them on their books until they can resell them.
But before we get to that point, there is a long due diligence process. So it may be, as the underwriter is going through its very detailed due diligence on both the plan for the development and the public improvements and everything else, there is always the chance that the underwriter could say, wait a minute, I don't think we're going to be able to sell these bonds because this is not going to be workable. And so, yes, if the underwriter is confident, as Anna says, they will purchase the bonds through the bond purchase agreement. But again, until those bonds are issued, parties can walk away. And again, it's a very detailed process that we go through.
How long
Has there
does it
been a
take?
case in Maryland where the bonds have not been sold?
I was working on a transaction in 2007, and as the economic downturn was happening, they decided to pull back. They had not gotten to the point of trying to sell the bonds, but the transaction actually never went forward. And I think there might have been some others that had been proposed that never moved forward, and that's typically because of an economic downturn or something turned up in the due diligence process. I also worked on a financing that actually did close in 2007, and it was luckily done as a drawdown bond, and the proceeds, certain amount of proceeds were drawn down at closing, and the development never occurred. Special taxes were levied on the property, which were actually owned by the developer. Those were paid, but within a couple years, it paid off the amount of the bonds that had been drawn down, and then it all folded in on itself because no further bond proceeds were ever actually drawn down.
So how long does this process take?
It can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending, in terms of starting from jump and getting the parties on board. 6 months to 2 years. I've seen it happen within 6 months, and I've seen it take a couple years, and I'll ask Anna and Keenan to weigh in as well.
So, normally I would say it takes like 8 to 12 months. However, we don't issue the bonds until all the pieces of development are ready to go forward. There have to be builders, contracts signed with builders, If there's any other financing, it has to be in place. The improvements have to be designed and permitted and bid out. As Anna said, we want to see a guaranteed maximum contract. So you have to have all these pieces in place, you know, before you issue bonds. And I don't remember which project you're referring to in 2007.
It was the one that was it was a municipality in Prince George's County, and it involved WMATA property. And, yeah,
Was it Greenville?
no, it wasn't Greenbelt.
I don't, so Lindsay's memory's better than mine, but so I don't remember the project, but I would bet the reason we never issued the bonds is the development never got, because all those pieces didn't come together. If all the pieces don't come together, we don't issue the bonds, okay? So a lot of times we end up waiting for the developer to bring all the pieces together. It doesn't take 2 years to put a bond issue together. It takes, you know, a good 8 to 12 months, because there is a lot of work that goes into it. It takes about 8 to 12 months to put together a bond issue, but if the developer hasn't put all the pieces together for the development, we're not going to issue the bonds until those pieces all come together.
So really, no work would be done until this is issued? Am I correct on that?
I mean, the work of the financing team can take that.
Right, but I'm saying work actually on
Do you
Cloverleaf.
mean like shovels in the ground?
Correct.
Yes.
Horizontal, of course, not vertical.
So normally, it wouldn't start until after the closing on the bonds, that you would actually then be able to put shovels in the ground, because you would often have to have the financing to get the GMP funded so that you can proceed with the work.
So that said, Jim, in response to your question, independent of this effort, we have our private placement memorandum completed for our equity call beyond what my family's put in over the last 21 years. So I'm bringing in new equity investment. Combine that with the start of this process, we may be able to obtain other bank financing combined with our equity that would allow us to kick things off. The value of the property is clearly enhanced if we're actually turning dirt. And we know we have to do the State Highway Administration work first.
Right.
We know we have to do the stormwater management work. Now, Gordon from Fox & Associates is in the audience. I would comment that all of those plans are done and have been approved by the authorities holding jurisdiction. So subject to final development agreement with the town and the posting of construction completion bonds, being very specific in saying that different from the bonds we are discussing.
Right.
Then we would seek to move forward with state highway and stormwater while the rest of this is going on in the background.
Mr. Cross, could you give us just a very rough percentage of, you had said earlier that you had planned, like you will have the commercial property and the learning center, the memory center. What percentage will Cloverleaf be responsible for versus what future owners will be responsible for?
I think the best way to answer that is in the way we count it in EDUs, because that's what we've tracked based off the sewer treatment plant. So I think in terms of equivalent dwelling units, and so we know we have 50 townhouses plus 26 townhouses on home plate, 76, 74 or so single-family home lots, independent of the ones that are in the senior living facility, compared to an overall total of 374. So you're hitting slightly under the 50% mark that is going to be allocated to the townhouses and single-family homes that will be sold.
Okay.
Remember, we have.
I follow what you're saying. I have had many citizens call me and just talk about this to all of you. But talk to me like the average citizen that doesn't have a clue what an EDU is. Are you going to have your whole development pay for this special tax, or is Cloverleaf LLC gonna absorb, say, 30% and 70% of future citizens will pay for it? I mean, is that
Bonnie,
a fair
I'm afraid I
assessment?
don't understand your question.
Well, you had mentioned you were gonna still own or be responsible certain aspects of the whole.
And then lease the land and.
Yeah. And then the private, is that what you mean, Bonnie?
Correct, like
Yeah.
the future, I think some citizens believe that you're going to have future homeowners pay for all of it. But you had mentioned the special tax, but you had mentioned you're gonna retain through
So-
Cloverly, the commercial property and the memory care facility, which is going to take a portion out of that whole nut, if you will.
So what Keenan has computed for me previously is, where do we think the appropriate threshold is for the amount of special tax that a single-family home or townhouse owner should pay? And in turn, he's acutely aware of the sensitivity in the market. If I pass too much on to the senior living facility operator, HDG, who we think we're partnering with, might say, yeah, wait a minute, what happened there? So that balancing act is going on. But I think it follows the numbers of what are we developing? How many single-family homes, how many townhouses, how many other users? You had mentioned earlier, for instance, that personal property taxes can be subjected to this. So we're gonna be looking at, in the commercial properties and in the apartment building and in the senior living facility, what might go to the personal property taxes instead of to the ad valorem special tax on real property.
If I could, Keenan, we're talking about special taxes totally, no ad valorem taxes as special taxes, correct? Because special taxes can be structured either as special taxes or ad valorem, and we typically don't structure special taxes as ad valorem taxes because then they're subject to the uniformity requirement of the Maryland Constitution. The beauty of structuring special taxes on a special basis means that you really can allocate the benefits of each type of property on a reasonable basis so that it bears its portion. Now, typically in Maryland, we have seen a personal property tax rate of 0 in special taxing districts. So, but this one, Keenan, we're thinking that we might, no, Keenan's shaking his head no. Because while this, yeah, the statute says you can impose the special taxes on real and personal property in the district, but it's, in my experience, it's always only been imposed on the real property in the district.
Bonnie, however, to the final thrust of your question, it is not in my interest to piss off all of the single-family home and townhouse buyers by hiking them too much. So the expectation is that the commercial and long-term hold parts of the property will carry their weight.
Oh, exactly, but they are going to also have this special tax. They're not exempt from that.
All 75 acres gets hit, with the exception of the acreage that doesn't pay taxes, like the open spaces that we deed to the HOA, the nature trails, the playgrounds. That stuff doesn't get taxed, so it doesn't get hit.
But I also, when we're talking about if Cloverly LLC is going to be ground leasing the property for the commercial or the senior living, through the arrangements, they may pass on the obligation to pay the special taxes, but they are the owner of record, and so if it isn't paid, it's their obligation.
So it refers back, because you had
Right,
mentioned that at
it's-
the beginning, that you were gonna do some of the leasing of land.
My ground leaseholder doesn't pay his lease, I'm still on the hook for all
Exactly.
taxes related to the parcel.
As the real property owner, yeah.
So Lindsay, there is a minimal risk to the town, is what, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
always an assumption of some sort of risk with anything that you do.
Correct.
But it sounds like there's fail-safes and the opportunity to pull out if you can't actually market the bonds and things like that. So,
Yeah, yes, I mean, we try and structure, first of all, I, in my role as bond counsel to the town, always am looking to make sure through the development and through the indenture and through the legislation that it's very, very clear that the town's full faith and credit, and the town is not obligated to pay the special taxes or to backstop any deficiency in the special taxes. And again, this is why we sell to sophisticated investors, because they understand this kind of product, and because you don't issue general obligation bonds for your own purposes to the public market. You don't have a rating you'd be worried about,
And
so.
you've done this enough to see that that's always the concern, whether it's on Facebook, social media, what meetings,
Absolutely.
public hearing, it's always,
It's what
the
is the,
town is always,
yes.
the residents are always concerned that if they've lived here for 50 years and this, I'm pointing at you, but if the event, you know, if it doesn't
Right.
come to fruition, then the backstop is then on the burden of those that have lived here.
The general
you know.
fund is not responsible
Okay.
in any way, shape, or form. And that's very clear under the statute as well, the way the Maryland statute is written. So, and we put that, we make that very clear in the offering documents.
So what should we have asked that we haven't? Because you're the experts and we're not. Are we missing? Are we not?
I was going to say that Anna and Lindsay did such a great job. I really didn't have anything to add. You know, I think they've both been very thorough
Right.
in addressing. But I do want to say that what's before you today is not the end of the process. It's the start of the process.
Right.
There's a lot of work, and this will come back to you multiple times, and you know, with additional information and due diligence, and you'll have additional opportunities to see how it's coming together. So, you know, it can be, you know, now I'm, you know, you don't want to go forward if the answer is no, you don't have any interest, because just a lot of people are going to be doing work. But if it's something you're willing to explore, you're not being asked to say absolutely yes right now. You're, you know, the question is really, are you willing to go forward, explore this, look into it, you know, do more work on it? But this will come back to you multiple times. One thing that I want to point out that I think is very important, there's an offering document that's prepared to market the bonds. That offering document is prepared pursuant to SEC regulations. And one of those regulations is every risk factor has to be disclosed to bondholders. That makes it a great disclosure document for you as well, because all of those risk factors, they have to be disclosed, okay? And the very important, very significant penalties if you don't disclose those risk factors. So it tells you what all those risk factors are as well.
Any other questions?
So I suspect that, like, when I look at a development like this isn't an out of the ordinary development. It's a very traditional, you know, homes, townhomes, water, sewer, nothing's out of the ordinary. So I don't understand where the risk is with traditional lending. So what we're basically being asked is, banks have looked at this, the people who, this is their bread and butter, their expertise, and they've looked at it, and for some reason, it's too high of a risk for them. So now we're being asked to push that risk onto future homeowners of Smithsburg, which I'm not comfortable with.
Respectfully, Mr. Dan, I don't believe that's correct, and I've detailed already this evening.
Yeah.
I am the first improvement on Maryland 77 and 64 in 25 years. We're fundamentally changing that intersection. We're adding turn lanes. We're adding acceleration and deceleration. We're adding entrances. Right now, as many of the public may be aware, the physical road bed of Maryland 77, Foxville Road, is not centered in the right-of-way. The road bed is offset towards the Dollar General. There's extra right-of-way north of the road bed. That's where the stormwater from 400 acres up the mountain, much of it in the State Highway Administration's roadway, and comes racing down the mountain. And right now, that either overbreaches 77 and 64 and flows down South Main Street, or some of it makes the right turn and goes through the clogged culverts into Mike Scott's property. We're having to fix all of that as directed by State Highway. That is not part of normal development. When I came to the town and the ground was in the designated growth area for the town, as signed off by Mayor Myers, as signed off in your comp plans, it was there because sewer and water had to be available. As it turns out, water was not available. So we're building a water boost pump station so that we can provide water and fire suppression to every structure on the property. That is not normal development. And we are the first ESD to the MEP in environmentally sensitive design to the maximum extent practical, stormwater management facilities, biomass facilities to go in eastern Washington County, and we're putting 3 of them in so that we can attempt to contain the 100-year flood coming off of 400 acres off the mountain. That is not normal development expense. All of that occurs before I can get onto the ground and start building normal roads, normal sewer, and normal water. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the perspective, but there's a different perspective in the bond market and a banks. Banks have a very short-term perspective because they're a source of money or demand deposits. So a bank wants to make a loan where they're financing 25, at most 50 lots at a time or homes at a time, okay? They don't want to get too far ahead of the development. What they don't want to finance is public infrastructure that's going to take development that's going to occur over multiple years to pay back, because a bank has a very short-term perspective. Bondholders have a very long-term perspective. We often refer to bondholders as being patient investors. Bonds are the appropriate tool to finance major public infrastructure. A bank is not the right financial tool to finance major public infrastructure. That's the difference. I think, if we have bonds to put in the major public infrastructure, you'll have banks willing to finance the lot improvements, but they don't want to finance the public infrastructure. They're not the right tool to finance major public infrastructure. The bonds are the right tool to finance major public infrastructure.
We often see bonds come into play when we have what we refer to as extraordinary costs. So let me give you an example of that. In Baltimore City, have you ever been to Harbor Point?
Mm-hmm.
So Harbor Point is built on a former Superfund site. So that was contaminated many years ago, and they put a concrete cap over that property. And it was an impediment to the ability to develop because no bank wanted to lend to a developer to demolish that cap and figure out how to put development into the ground because it was a Superfund site and because they knew that the ground underneath was contaminated. They had to access the bond marketplace in order to get the financing to make that move forward. And Mr. Frost, even though he doesn't have a Superfund site, is in a similar position in what's being requested from him to get the infrastructure into the ground to eventually go vertical. They're beyond the traditional development costs that you would see with most development because of the road improvements that he's being asked to put in and the stormwater management facilities. So development like Harbor Point, one of them, Baltimore Peninsula also had an issue with contamination. Well, it was Port Covington, they've renamed it Baltimore Peninsula, that's a new marketing theme. But those types of developments, they're transformative for neighborhoods. They wouldn't exist without tools like this.
Yeah, that's apples and oranges, but I understand what you're saying.
So I appreciate you bringing up at the beginning about growth. This was in the comp plan as part of the town's growth plan. Because again, it seems like in social media, we're reliving 2017 all over again. And just being able to have this conversation is part of the reason why I supported the annexation back then, was just seeing the fervor around a convenience store that may be built at the corner of 64 and 66, and the outcry of the public, our body, and our planning commission, and the folks nearby don't have a voice in that matter. So I appreciate, A, you addressing that, having your staff here tonight, and paying for Mrs. Rader to be here as well, so that council could have this at least dialogue and conversation after Ed's great 101, his quick tutorial. Yeah, but I'm just saying, he did a great job of presenting the 101. And there's a lot
in the same place.
Yeah, but there is a lot of information to consume, and I appreciate everyone's time to be here so that the ones in the room, and then hopefully the 400 or 500 that rewatch this video, can get the facts and not the misinformation or hyperbole that they see elsewhere.
Johnny, I would simply close with the comment I've made to Greg White, the Planning Commission for years, Bonnie when she was on it. There's a part of Cloverleaf that is job creation for the town of Smithsburg. Your largest employer is the bakery, but our commercial corner and those 5 commercial lots represent doing good.
not coming, who was never coming? Okay.
Nope, no, I studied capitalism, so that,
Got it.
that's 40 jobs on that corner alone. The senior living facility campus is 50 plus, between the hospitality, the healthcare, the janitorial, the campus. So that's what we're bringing along with places to live. But we've got to get through this logjam and make it happen. Thank you, members of council, I appreciate it.
Excuse me.
Kathy, welcome to the
Mr.
fire.
Cross, you know, I couldn't let the night go without.
No. We were doing so good.
I know.
I
And-
threw a
and
bone
this
at
is-
him. I knew
This
this
is,
was in
this is
trouble.
more
Yes,
a soup to nuts type of question. Because I would think that you wouldn't be pursuing this process if you hadn't, at least in your mind, some way through your due diligence, try to develop projected numbers. So my question is pretty basic, is on the typical residence, I'm not talking about your senior living or anything, the typical residence, have you calculated what you think initially the special tax will be? So that if you're marketing these properties to prospective buyers, what are you gonna be telling them as to how much more they're going to pay than other residents? And then the other is, in combination with that, do you have a projected figure on HOA fees? Because as you ticked off your letters of what it makes the payment, are those numbers that you've done, you seem to think that you still will be competitive in some way with the market. So I'm just asking, at this, certainly can't project 30 years from now, but you must have some idea of what those numbers are, because you would have had to make a determination whether it's even worth your while going this far and expending the money that you've expended to try to push this.
And when did I acquire the ground?
Well, I don't think that's the, this is a pretty simple question.
2004.
Do you have, have you,
2004.
yeah,
I have learned in the 21 years since that I'm not going to quote prices. We'll see where we end up having to spend on the guaranteed maximum price from contracts that are done in
Yeah.
bonding, where we end up in the finance markets, and where the national market is. We are the first development of this
Okay.
size in eastern Washington County. We
Is-
will disclose, as required by honor and law, our HOA dues and the special taxing will be a prominent part of all of our sales
Okay.
material. But I cannot answer you tonight as to
simple
what that's
question.
gonna be.
If you don't have the answer tonight, that's fine.
Decline to answer.
Well, you declined it.
That's
Okay.
concerning. That's very concerning.
Thank you again.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here.
So Ed or Lindsay,
Yes.
process. So we've heard the 101, we've now heard from Mr. Cross. I'm assuming that nothing triggers unless the council decides to go down that path.
That's correct.
Okay.
And, you know, if the council wants to have additional sessions, you know, with just me, I'm happy to come back to drill down into various considerations with you.
Okay.
And again, if the inclination is, yes, let's start down the path, but we're not committing to do anything, then the next steps would be getting fee agreements in place with the developer for the various professionals, and then also starting the due diligence process in terms, and the first step under the statute would be the creation of the request to the council. And while Mr. Cross sent you a letter that covers some of the things that would be in that request, as bond lawyers, we like to zhuzh that up and include certain things that really will relate specifically to the financing. That would be step one, and Keenan's firm would be working on the rate and method, and really, I think, the rate and method, MuniCap would have to decide that it is fairly confident in what it is proposing in the rate and method, as it is going to make sense before we would go very far down the path. So, but once we get to the legislative, first there would be the written request. Then we would create the district through what's known as a designation resolution, and we'd have to hold a public hearing before that is adopted, and typically we would introduce that at one meeting. We have to give at least 10 days published notice of the public hearing. We would hold the public hearing at the second meeting, and you would then, take into account the response you get from the public. You would have the opportunity to ask additional questions. You could decide to approve the designation at that resolution at that meeting, or to defer until a future date. One important point that I didn't make, as we take these legislative steps, we typically put a sunset date in the designation resolution and the bond ordinance or the bond resolution that says that if no bonds are issued within X number of years from the date of passage, that becomes terminated, null, and void. Now, there are financings that have taken longer to get off the ground, and I know that Anna has been involved in some of them, where the process is going along. You're coming up on the sunset date, and if the legislative body is amenable, they will pass a supplemental resolution or supplemental ordinance to extend the sunset date. But from an issuer's council's perspective, I usually recommend that we put a sunset date in that legislation.
Thank you. Council? Thoughts? Process?
Well, I feel we've gotten a lot of information. At this point, a lot of information I still need to digest. So I would like to continue to think about all of this and consider all the options. I'm not ready to make any kind of a motion at this point.
I would like to move this to our meeting, September 2nd. I think this deserves all council people to be present and to be part of the discussion and making a decision to move forward.
Just so you know, I can't be here at the September 2nd meeting. I'm already committed to another council meeting that night.
Okay.
And I would suggest if there is specific information as you're ruminating that
Right.
you think would help, reach out to Mr. Cross and.
Absolutely.
And it might be.
Well, I mean, there is specific information, like how much does he plan to, what is his estimate for each dwelling unit? I'm sure he has that number, but he won't tell us for some reason. Because, but my position hasn't changed. This raises more questions than answers. Dan, he's been at this for 21 years. This is what he does, apparently, but he wasn't able to anticipate all of these shortcomings or all these issues that, we're in Maryland, we have MDE. Everyone knows MDE exists. Everyone knows that MDE has certain requirements. Yet he wasn't able to anticipate that. Same thing with State Highway Administration. So we're being asked to essentially have the town enter into some sort of partnership with him where we have to trust that he's going to follow through with everything he says. And yeah, sure, there's safeguards in place, but this could end up being a colossal failure. And instead of having a development that is developed properly by someone who has the experience and expertise in doing this type of development, we may end up with a partial development that sits empty for 20, 30 years. And during that time, the town misses out on tax revenue. And then also, we still don't know what the impact is going to be on future homes, on prices. Is it going to decrease the overall assessable tax base? Probably. If you slap on, additional $2,000 a year on home, like, what is that going to, how's that going to impact stuff? It's definitely going to impact things. And that means the town collects less tax dollars. So when, if that happens, there will be a cost, whether it's an opportunity cost or, whatever, there will be a cost to the town and to everyone because we're going to have to make up that tax difference somewhere.
Bonnie, you're the only one that has it.
I don't claim to be a developer. I don't claim to know what you're faced with. I think this process, kudos to you for thinking outside the box. I would really like to get more information on it. going forward, you know, sometimes you hit a wall, and it makes you step back and look at things that you never thought of. And this could be one of those processes, so I'd like to sit on it for a while.
So you had mentioned there was some information that you could share, numbers or something that you could pull to Councilman Dan's, one of his questions early on. If that information, whatever is confidential or whatever could be shared, that would probably be some of that information to look upon. Lindsay, you had said something about an actual formal written request, so the letter does not count as that?
No.
So we'd actually have to receive.
But again, we wouldn't actually draft that
Okay.
until you have sort of reached a consensus that you
Okay.
want to continue moving forward. Because again, from both sides, we don't want to waste everybody's, we don't want to waste your time.
Right.
We don't, and of course, to make your decisions about continuing to move forward without having given any specific approvals, you of course need information. And so it's always a little bit of a chicken and an egg getting these transactions going if they go forward.
So I guess the question would be, knowing that Mrs. Rader can't be here on the 2nd, are we comfortable in having at least the preliminary discussion with Councilman Snyder here, whether we go forward without Lindsay being here, or do we wait until Lindsay would be, or the next time we meet wouldn't be until the middle of September, the 16th?
I think I am okay on the 16th. I'd have to I have a council meeting on the 15th, but I think I'm okay on the 16th.
So that would be the
It's
question of
16th.
council.
It's the 16th, right?
Yeah. Because it sounds like 3 of you are okay with having the discussion back on the
Right.
plate.
Yeah. I'm okay for the 16th.
I'll have to double check
Yeah.
at the office tomorrow and let you
Yeah,
know.
let us know, because
Yeah.
then we'll adjust, but my
You okay
understanding
with that,
is,
Kathy? 16th?
Yeah.
That's our normal night.
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay.
okay.
Dan, Dave?
My
16th?
position hasn't
Yeah,
changed.
yeah.
but I'm-
Well, you'll
I'd
be here on the
more than
16th.
happy to talk about it on the 16th.
Okay. Well, then we'll work on your scheduling, and then Mr. Cross, we'll let you know once we know what Mrs. Rader's availability is. Okay? Okay, so we'll move it to either the 2nd or the 16th, depending upon availability. Okay.
But thank you all for.
Yes, thank you very much.
It
This was very informative.
Very informative. Appreciate it.
A lot of information. So the next one should be pretty easy.
So moved.
Yeah, approve the MUCFC grant. This was the ad hoc committee. They did receive a letter saying that they were approved for the award of $4,989 from the Maryland Department of Transportation Urban Tree Program. We just need to accept that grant.
I move to accept the grant.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there you go. Council member remarks and concerns, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
I move to accept the grant.
David?
Second.
Dave seconded it.
and the vote was unanimous. Council member remarks and concerns, Dave?
Again, I want to thank Chief Marker and all the volunteers that put on Shop with a Cop. It was a terrific turnout, and I think that was the longest line I've ever seen for ice cream. That was impressive. But yeah, and I look forward to the Cinnamon Bun Fun Run. It's going to be a great event. That's all I got.
Thank you, Dave. Kathy?
A couple things. First of all, the aforementioned Cinnamon Bun Fun Run, if you haven't signed up, please do so. I know I'm walking slowly, but, walking. I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that school's going to be starting, and congratulate the children that are going to be going back to school and the college students heading back to school, and parents, and yeah. So, here we go with the school season starting.
Jim?
My turn?
Yeah, again?
Yeah, I'd just like to, again, thank the people who turned out National Night Out, and also I'd like to thank Councilwoman McCormick for putting the package together with Lions Park Pond, I think that was very informative and it's gonna be very beneficial moving forward. And, back to school, start watching, you know, the kids getting out, so everybody be careful.
Bonnie?
Seems like a busy, busy summer, and September's right around the corner. And our volunteers have accomplished a great deal over the summer. And I just would hope that each one would know that your efforts are seen, appreciated, and certainly never overlooked. So thanks for volunteering.
Thank you. The next mayor and council regular meeting is Tuesday, September 2nd, 7 PM up here. Special session will be Tuesday, September 16th, 7 PM, also up here. Commission meetings, the Economic Development Commission is scheduled to meet August 21st, first floor conference room. Smithsburg Community Activities Commission, August 19th, in the SEAC room, which is behind that door. The Park Commission, September the 8th, first floor conference room. Planning Commission, September 9th is what we have. In the planning room at 7 PM, and the ad hoc is August 14th, downstairs conference room at 7 PM. Don't forget, we have our, what will be this season's last Third in the Bird on Saturday. I know myself and Candy Stoneberger are signed up to do the dunk tank, so please bring cash or canned goods, I think. Yep, so, and we have, I guess it's a Beach Boys tribute band that'll be in the square, so please come down, hope the weather's great, and then all of those runners and walkers get ready to partake in the fun run, so appreciate it. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.